And I wanted to, on our first episode, talk about why I'm starting the podcast. And I have been in sales for around 17, 18 years. Always had to be meaning to the job, and not. I didn't want to just be a commodity or a number, and which some people can associate with sales. And so throughout my career, I've found meaning in different ways, and this is the most current medium, is this podcast and having these conversations with various characters and building that community and getting feedback from listeners and having those connections. And so that's what the podcast is about. I'd love to hear from you. And without further ado, we'll talk to our first guest. My first guest is Adam Johnson, and this was a really deliberate choice to kick off the podcast, because Adam and I worked together at Salesforce, just feet away from each other in a cube farm, and we got to know each other really well, hung out outside of work, and I was able to admire and through observing him on calls, and I think I hold him in high regard in the top 3 sales leaders I've ever been around, and also people and integrity, and he's a family man and just someone I admire in all capacities. So Adam Johnson, SVP of Sales at ActiveCampaign, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I appreciate the kind words. Hopefully they're justified.
Yeah. Great to see you. I know you lived in San Francisco and now you're in Chicago. So we'll see each other once every 6 months. But the way I wanted to, when thinking about how best to go about today's episode, I wanted to think about Adam and, obviously what sales means to me and what I think is interesting to talk about currently. But what would be interesting given what I know about Adam and Adam's personality? And so we'll get into that. But first, how about you just start with, when growing up, when did you know you were going to go into sales? What was your thought process when you decided to be a salesperson? Why did you get into sales?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I've always enjoyed interacting with people. Every job that I've ever had really has been, even back into like retail, it was always around interacting with others. And so that's always been something that's given me energy. And, oddly enough, I started my education in computer science. Like I thought, hey, like technology and networks, infrastructure, software, like those are things that'll be valuable. But I ultimately made the decision to change from that path because it wasn't giving me that sort of that energy, right? Like I was finding myself like working in a lab, spending a lot of time alone. And that wasn't feeling right for me. And so I ended up ultimately changing, studying business. And so probably about halfway through college when I made that decision is when I knew that like something working with people was going to be the ticket for me in terms of something that could sustain me, as a career path. And as a result of that, I ended up getting a job actually at the Illinois State Daily Vidette, which was the campus newspaper, selling print advertisement to local businesses. And that was my first real official sales gig, if you will. It was tough. It was challenging, also rewarding and fun at times. Not so much fun at others, but it was a great experience. And I think from that point forward, I really knew that was going to be a part of what I did in some way.
Yeah. And, I had a psychology degree and I flirted with the psychology path after college for a couple of years and just didn't feel right. It was kind of extreme mental illnesses. And I worked at a place where people would go immediately after being institutionalized. And I just saw a lot of recidivism. So, basically, we would say that they're well enough to move on to maybe a communal place. And then we'd see them again in 3 months. So I didn't see any progress. I didn't see that we were changing anything. And also I didn't understand how some people, put in a lot of energy and effort and others didn't, and we got compensated the same. So that's what was appealing to me in sales, was you get what you put in. And I think I thrive on having conversations with different personalities and asking a lot of questions and being genuinely authentic. And so I feel like there are a lot of skills that are needed, are usually associated with success. I have, but there's certainly things I'm weak on. I had to learn. But Adam, what do you think? What do you think is unique about you that you bring to, or you attribute to your success? And is it the same as it is? Has it been consistently the same thing from your first job till now, or?
Well, I think it changes. Like when I first got into sales, like I was definitely driven by kind of the earning potential and the opportunity to, as you mentioned, kind of get out of it what you put into it, which was very appealing for me, especially like earlier on. And so I loved winning, right? It's fun to win. And I think, that's something that attracts people early in their careers. I think especially people who are competitive and motivated in that way will end up finding their way into sales for those reasons. And I think that's pretty normal, but I don't think that's necessarily what sustains people or what allows people to make, a lasting career out of it. In many ways, it's people's ability to handle failure that leads to a successful or sustained career in sales. Because the wins are fewer than the losses. As a career wears on, like you're gonna lose way more deals than you win. You're gonna get hung up on way more times than you have people who are excited to hear from you. And I think as a seller, specifically as a frontline seller, those are things you've got to be able to make peace with and move on from quickly if you want to have a lasting career. I think now that I've gotten some miles behind me and I've been able to experience some wins and suffer some losses, I'm particularly excited about having the opportunity to lead teams and build teams and contribute to the success of others and hopefully help them learn from some of the things I've been able to do well and avoid some of the mistakes that I've made along the way too.
Did you ever feel, and I think this is a common thought or association with sales, did you ever feel that just like you're a number, that you have a lot of other values, your character and your integrity and your personality, but that sales doesn't care about that you're only as good as what you bring in. Revenue is king. Did you experience that? Did you have kind of a internal dialogue about that at any point in your career?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a function, I think, to a large degree in the organizations that you're a part of and the people specifically who you work for. I've been really lucky. I've worked for a lot of really fantastic leaders and people who I admire and who I'd love to have the chance to work with again. And I've seen the other side of that. And I think, so that's something for me where now I think that's advice that I would give younger people in their careers: pay close attention to the people that you work for and with, because they will to a large extent shape the experience that you have and the way that you feel about the work that you're doing. Because they control that to a large degree. And I think it's important to know, most roles are performance based, right? Like whether you're a seller, a marketer, or a customer support agent, chances are you've got metrics that you have to hit. I think sales is both lucky and unlucky in the sense that it's really very binary in terms of whether or not you're doing well.
Yeah.
So people can look at, look at a number and really easily judge whether you're having success or not. That's not necessarily a reflection at all points of the investment of efforts, even in some cases, the quality of work that you put in. But it is easier for people to make a judgment of whether you're a success or a failure based on your attainment percentage. And I think there are moments when that is a benefit to the role, and there are moments when it might make people not be as excited to be in sales as a career.
Yeah. So that day when I went to the family gathering and I felt like I was bringing no meaning to the world, and I was just that sales guy. On the way home, I was really kind of, entertaining various ideas of how you can romanticize sales. Could you say that we're the messengers, we're poeticizing emerging technologies, and we have the power of choosing which companies, which people within those companies, and when they get these technologies that advance culture, that advance the way we go about our day to day. And that sounds very, it sounds poetic a bit, but that didn't feel natural to me about how I feel about sales. What really I like about sales is, and you have to get good at it, is if the relationship is there with your manager, if the culture in general with your team is good, you can't put a price on that. And if you have passion for the product, you think that you're best in breed, and you're not selling a product that you're going to have to, where you're going to have to leverage pricing to your advantage. And of course, the money is great. But if those things are in place, I found, and I'm also more of a startup guy, I'm pretty happy. And what I get out of it is when of course, in entry level sales, it's more transactional, more about activity, and 50 calls a day and 50 emails. But as you evolve, you get into more cerebral sales, and I like that it's a chess game. I like figuring out how to work smarter, and where there's weakness, and it's different for every job. But I'm finding right now, putting the focus away from me and looking at what's happening in sales today. I think, especially with the millennials and the conversations I'm hearing about sales are much more about meaning, and a lot of times quality of life over money. And given the times, everyone's remote right now, given the coronavirus, we're all at home, and perhaps that's comforting for some, being around family and whatnot. But do you feel that that conversation is going to be top of mind when the quarantine is over and we go back to work? Is that going to be a topic that is going to be the top 5 company objectives? I'm seeing human resources getting a lot more money these days, but what conversation do you think is going to be going on in hundreds and hundreds of conference rooms with the high level executives?
Well, to talk a little bit about like the idea of kind of romanticizing sales, like I love that concept, and I think that's it's an interesting idea. Like I will share with you a comment that a sales trainer made to our group once, and it's something that really resonated with me, and that's sales is the art of convincing someone to do what's in their best interests. And that to me really helped sort of like solidify in my mind the fact that sales is actually like a very noble effort, a very noble profession. It's not slimy or sleazy. or pushy or self-interested. It's you're trying to represent something that you believe in, something that you have conviction is useful and creates value for others. And then you're trying to find matches for that solution or product, whatever it is that you're representing. And I think if you find a match within a prospect, that you believe that your solution is in their best interest, then you can be convicted and you can, build a story and you can tell that story and you can be persistent in pursuing that without that, becoming something that is ugly. And I think to me that really helped me. It also helped kind of solidify the idea that like, I'm not trying to like force something down someone's throat. I'm trying to work with them. I'm trying to help them figure it out. And I think, to a large degree, business users won't buy technology all that often. So like, I work for ActiveCampaign, as you mentioned, we're customer experience automation software. So we combine elements of like customer data platform, sales automation, marketing automation, and give our customers the ability to try and curate and orchestrate like a really phenomenal experience for their clients throughout the entirety of their life cycle. And so I believe in that. Like that's a message I can get behind. That's a story I can get behind. And so I feel that it's okay to have conviction and to be persistent around, us pursuing that, because we have a chance to help people do better. So to me, that is a bit romantic, right? Like I think that's a way to at least look at it in a really positive light. And it's an approach I think that resonates with buyers as well, because they want to work with people who are going to try and help them solve their problems. They don't want to necessarily work with people who are going to help push their own agenda. That's not useful. It's not helpful. But if you are genuinely curious and interested in collaborating with them to try and help them solve problems, I think that lands well.
Yeah. And obviously, I think there were a lot of solutions where the buyers many times didn't enjoy the whole experience, the evaluation and purchasing cycle. And that's why today, I think it's about 65% of the evaluation journey is what they call the dark funnel, where 65% of that journey where they're evaluating your software or your solution or your platform, they do it by themselves before they reach out to the company and the salesperson. So yeah, I like it. I mean, I love acting, and I love I love acting, and I've been in plays, and I like to make little videos, with friends, and we'll come up with a scene or something. And I'm, for me, it's not that I'm acting when I'm selling and when I'm in a room with 10 other people from the company, but it's a lot of the same, a lot of the things you think about to have an optimal performance as an actor apply to that scenario in a sales process in that conference room, where how you say it is more powerful than what you say. And the ability to talk to a CEO or a CMO just casually, like they're, you're at a happy hour, or, and not just thinking about that you're a subordinate and they're a C-level, and right away they can sense that there is that nervousness. And so for me, it's another way I find meaning is it's a lot of times it's you practicing, practicing being on stage and being comfortable there on stage.
Yeah.
So that's something.
I mean, I think you've got to have there are different approaches, I think, different variations of, how you communicate when you're communicating to different audiences. And I think, one thing that reminded me of a little bit what you were talking about is actually like Tony Robbins has a video on building rapport that I think is really good. And he talks about the idea that people want to do business with people that they like or with people that they want to be like. And I think that's an interesting way of thinking about it. What I've found is that for most people, it's way easier to be likable than it is to be someone who someone else aspires to be, And so I think, that's an interesting kind of idea. And one of the ways that I think is the most relevant way to generate likability is just to be authentic and to be genuine and to be curious about other people. And so I think if you, regardless of who you go into a conversation with, whether that's a CEO or a CMO or an individual salesperson, like if you're interested in what they're doing and if you're trying to add value to them, it's much more likely that they're going to find you likable and someone that they want to continue interacting with.
Yeah. And I want to start inching towards closure here because I want to make these episodes short and sweet. There's a lot of noise out there and I don't expect everyone to take 30 minutes or an hour out of their day to listen to my podcast. So I want to end with one of my more recent thoughts because I've been reading actually on Audible. I've been listening to a lot of books, and whereas I was reading one book or two books a year when I had to hold the book in my hand, I'm going through like one a week. So I've probably listened to about 10 books in the last 2 months. And one of them was Selling from the Heart by Larry Levine, where he's talking about just what you're saying, being authentic. And I think that's absolutely true. And some people, if they're natural selves, then actually it might do them a disservice. I think you're one of the lucky ones where your personality, if you're natural, you're likable. I think for the most part I am too. But that speaks to more and more where I am today. What's top of mind for me is energy efficiency. And I go into my job and my personal personality is there's no gap between my personal personality and my work personality, a little bit, but very minimal. So I'm not exhausting energy on that. And I love my boss, my current boss. I'm currently sales director at MRP, and love the culture, and everything is wonderful. So I can focus on sales, my job, and not exhaust energy on anything else. And that's where I am today is being efficient with my energy, being very deliberate about where I'm working and ensuring that is all in place so I can perform, at an optimal level. And then doing things like this and finding meaning in sales and having conversations with people in the sales profession. Conversations that just probably don't happen at work. So I wanted to conclude with where I am and what's top of mind. And Adam, would you, how about you? What's top of mind for you these days? I think you've been on some podcasts as you keep rising on the ladder. You're invited to various, podcasts or speaking events. What's most attractive content wise? What would jump at, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, I think, for me, I'm fairly focused on kind of like building a team right now and helping to develop others and investing energy in how do we organize, how do we set up a team that will help deliver, help evangelize ActiveCampaign and what we're doing, and also, creating a team and an organization that will also help build people's skills and careers so that they have a really positive experience while they're with us. And I hope, ultimately that people will look back on the time that they spent, with ActiveCampaign as something that they're happy to talk about and excited to talk about when they go interview for their next, job further down the line. And hopefully that's something that's exciting in terms of, and so that is my primary focus. I think in terms of just, overall trends and things that are interesting to me, I think a little bit about kind of the pendulum of, what is important in sales. Like if you think of the Challenger sale, like that's a book I'm sure you're familiar with. Most people who are in sales are familiar with the concept at least. And, that's something where there was this big swing away from relationships being important. And, I wonder if at some point that pendulum is going to swing back in the other direction. Because I think I think especially, given some of the changes in the economy and how things might unfold here, I think having trust, having, an established and good and positive relationship may take us back to a point where relationships might potentially become more valuable. And so I wonder if there's some sort of cycle that exists there, or if that will be kind of that kind of more focus on things like Challenger and others will be a consistent theme over time.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll end with this. You got to remember that these authors, they're salespeople too. And they probably believe in the methodology that they're preaching, but they also want to sell books. So I actually think that, the technology and the office environment, they change pretty rapidly, but the psychology in sales does not. And it's a lot of fundamentals and if you keep it simple, what I find is if you keep it simple, have integrity, be authentic, know the product in and out, know how to use your resources and collaborate and minimize stress and anxiety, then you're in a good place. And that's where I am.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So Adam, you have a family and I don't, but I hope you have a great weekend. It's Friday. What is it? April 24th, first episode. Thank you for being my first guest. And we'll have this out next week. So have a great weekend. And I will send you this podcast when it's finalized.
Sounds good, Eric. Thanks. Enjoy that San Francisco sunset.
All right. Thanks. Have a great one. Bye.